Hi, this is Jeff Korhan at jeffkorhan.com, and today we're going to talk with my friend Joe Calloway, who is an author of many books and an expert in areas of leadership and customer service. And I'm going to start off by letting Joe introduce himself.
Well, Jeff, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's great to talk with you. I guess the best way to sum up what I do is for for a very long time, for over 30 years, what I've done is help companies be more competitive. I guess if you had to boil it down, that's what it is. And I do that through a lot of speaking engagements, like you. I do a lot of speeches around the country, and also through the books and workshops and a little bit of consulting. But that's basically what I do is say, how do you take your business from here to here? How do you bump it up to the next level? And the way I do that is by watching the marketplace and saying, okay, what is it that all the market leaders, big ones, little ones, whether they're in service, manufacturing, IT, whatever they're in, what do they all have in common? So it's this constant evolution as the market changes. Of what does it take to win? What does it take to set yourself apart from the competition?
Right. And you do something that I really admire, something I always try to do, which is to simplify things, because these days we're so overwhelmed. And you've written many books, one that just got released, which really hits home on this topic. So tell us about being the best at what matters most.
Yeah, and thank you. That's the name of the new book, Be the Best at What Matters Most. And you know, I tell you, this really came to me through the recession. As I would work with companies or I'd be somewhere to give a speech to, 500 franchise owners or whatever, and people would say things like, Joe, I'm doing everything I can think of to make my company work, and it's just not happening. And then I would talk to the companies that were doing extremely well, and they'd say, well, we've boiled it down to the 2 or 3 most important things, and that's what we're doing. And so when somebody says I'm doing everything I can think of, my response now is, well, that's probably your problem.
Right.
Because the winners aren't the ones that do the most things. The winners are the ones that do the most important things. And so one thing that, I've not seen an exception to it, that all of the market leaders and the really strong companies I work with, one thing they all have in common is they're able to simplify their business. And not look at it as being complicated, even though some of them are in some pretty complicated businesses.
Right.
But they found ways to focus, simplify.
Well, you and I, as you remember, spoke at the same hospitality event in January, and you were getting on this topic a little bit. And so since that time, when I've been speaking, I've encouraged my audiences to just take one action, do one thing. And I can't tell you how just giving them permission to just do one thing well has been so powerful. And they walk out of there saying, thanks, Jeff, because they're just so overwhelmed with social media, trying to do it all. And I think it's a great message.
Oh, it is. And the thing about social media is I think, and I mean, you're the expert on that, but what I've tried to do is pick my lanes. I'm going to do it here, here, and here. And not try to be everywhere. It's too overwhelming for somebody like me. And yet, I think social media is a great example of how it can be a real force multiplier if you really get focused on the 2 or 3 avenues that you want to pursue. But the thing is, that principle carries over to just about anything having to do with your business. Pick your lane, get really good, really good, the best, at a handful of things, and you'll be fine.
Right. Well, okay, so let's talk about customers, because you get into all kinds of stories in the book about how to acquire customers and especially to retain them and keep them satisfied and loyal. What would a small business person want to be doing as far as trying to find kind of that singular focus as far as...
Excuse me. I think, Jeff, that for me the key is this. What are my customers' 3 or 4 most basic requirements, expectations, wants from me? It's like when you walk in a restaurant, what are the 3 or 4 things that they've got to get those right? If they don't, gone. You won't go back. what we've done is I think a lot of people have fallen in the trap of, okay, well, I'm going to go back and think of some wow factors and some extra things I can do to put some sizzle on the steak. And I'm good with that. That's great. Just be sure you're getting the steak right. You know, before you put a cherry on top of the cake, get the cake right.
Right.
And what I've found, I'm telling you, if you go to like Interbrand, interbrand.com, they always have their list of the top brands in the world. If you look at that list of the top brands, there's nothing particularly unique about any of them. They're just all rock solid good at the basics. And so that's what I'm preaching. And most of the business owners I work with get it. They're already one step ahead of me. They appreciate the reminder, but they're saying, you know, you're right. If we excel on the basics, if you win on the fundamentals, you win. My thing that I love to say is be so good at the basics that you're cutting edge.
Right, right. And I like that. Well, you gave a great example in the book about staying at hotels. As speakers, we could stay in a lot of luxurious hotels, but it made me realize that, yes, give me a quiet room with preferably free Wi-Fi, but at least Wi-Fi access, and a comfortable bed, and I'm happy. I mean, I love getting a luxurious room, but if you give me those basic requirements, that's what it's all about.
Well, you know what? It's funny. I've asked people around the country, particularly people that travel a lot. I've said, well, okay, what's a chain that you always feel pretty good when you see you're booked in? And the one that comes up more than any other is Marriott. And the reason, and there's nothing fancy about a Marriott, but they're generally, now there's the occasional exception, but generally so consistent. And it's funny, there's been, over the last few years, more and more speakers and writers say, well, what you got to do is surprise your customer. And what Marriott does is, no, we don't surprise our customer. And I mean, I get it about a pleasant surprise, but you'd be a whole lot, instead of putting your efforts into surprising people, put your efforts into consistency.
Absolutely.
And being a no surprises provider, vendor, company, partner.
Right. Well, so you mentioned in the book that obviously the challenge here is we know this. There isn't a whole lot new in any industry, but the real challenge is, of course, taking action. So if you're a small business of any kind and you're wearing multiple hats, what would be your recommendation as far as the first thing that they would want to do to kind of implement these ideas?
Well, certainly if they have coworkers, if they're not just a one-person business, I think I think one of the best things about my new book is at the end of each chapter there are questions, and those questions are meant to be discussed among the team. And I think one of the best things and most constructive discussions you can have with your team is to bring them in and say, okay, let's go around the room. I want everybody to write down, what do you think our number one priority should be right now? Don't say it out loud. Write it down. Because if you say it out loud, people are going to tend to follow the leader. And see if you've got consensus. If everybody in the room says, this is the number one thing we should be working on, well, there's your answer. Now, if you don't have consensus, that's good to know too, because you got 6 people that think our priorities are 6 different things. And so I think the first step is one of those obvious steps, which is, okay, everybody, let's answer the question, what is most important? Then once you determine it, there's no secret to taking action. You assign responsibility, you make that person accountable, you come up with a schedule, you give them what they need to get that job done, you check in regularly according to schedule, and you solve any problems along the way. I mean, that's how you get things done. It's funny, a lot of people say, well, we just can't seem to take action. Well, the example I use in the book, I think, is do you take the trash out every night? Yes. How do you do that? Well, I just know it has to be done. Well, okay. Then there you go. That's how you take action.
Yeah, it's all about working with customers and making sure they're happy. And I remember when I had my landscape business, I mean, my first manager, we agreed on one thing. We disagreed on plenty of things, believe me, but it was always about the customer, and that's what kept that business running well for 20 years.
Yeah, so, and I say that in the book, that ultimately when you answer the question, what matters most, a big chunk of that has got to be about what matters most to the customer. So, yeah, you're right on the money.
Sure. Well, okay, before we wrap up, just a reminder to everyone that Joe's book is available everywhere, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and it's Be the Best at What Matters Most.
Wherever fine books are sold.
Absolutely. So I'll let you kind of wrap things up. What are your closing comments for everyone?
Oh, gosh. I think my closing comments would be, listen, I'm going to go back and steal it from you, which is, if everybody watching, listening to this, including you and me, if we would all take action today on one thing that we know would make a difference, the cumulative power of that would be extraordinary. So just go look. There's an old saying: we don't get hurt by what we don't know. We get hurt by what we know and don't do. So take what you know you need to be doing and go do it.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next time.